In the beginning, God made heaven and earth. At first it was empty and dark. So God gathered up the light and called it day. He gathered up the darkness and called it night. God watches over everything. On day 2, God divided the air from the water. He put some water above the air and some below it. He named the air sky. On day 3, God was busy making puddles, oceans, lakes, waterfalls, rivers, and the dry ground too. He made so many different kinds of plants, trees, flowers, and bushes, no one could count them all. God said his work was good. On day 4, God put the sun in the sky to warm the earth by day, and put the moon and the stars in the sky to shine at night. Then God made spring, summer, fall, and winter. All that he made was good. On day 5, God made starfishes, octopuses, whales, and turtles. He made fast little fish for rivers and slippery big fish for the ocean. He made big birds like eagles to soar in the sky, and zippy little birds like hummingbirds. He made birds in all shapes, sizes, and colors. On day 6, God made the animals: puppies, cows, horses, kitties, bears, lizards, mice, worms, and lots more. Everything was good. But something was still missing. There were no people. So God made some. He made them to be just like him. He did this so they would become friends with him. God named the first man Adam and put him in a beautiful garden. God gave Adam all the animals, all the fish, and all the birds too. Then God gave Adam one more thing: a woman to be his wife.
I will call you Eve.
God gave Adam and Eve just one rule. They could eat anything they wanted, except the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden. But a sneaky snake came to Eve.
Eve, look at this tasty fruit. God knows if you eat it, you'll know everything, just like him.
So Eve ate the fruit. And then gave some to Adam. He ate it too. One evening, God came to visit Adam and Eve. But they were hiding. When God found them, He asked what they had done. So Adam told what they had done. Which made God sad. Because they had disobeyed God, Adam and Eve had to leave the beautiful garden. When they were outside of the garden, they had to work very hard just to grow their food. Long ago, God saw that the people on the earth were becoming very bad. But one man, Noah, obeyed God.
Noah, I want you to build a boat.
Noah started right away.
What on earth is this guy
But the
doing?
people laughed at Noah because they lived in a desert and there was no water anywhere for his boat. But Noah just went on building the boat. When the boat was finally finished, God told Noah and his family to go into the boat. In went his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. In went their wives and Mrs. Noah.
Now bring 2 of every animal.
Noah did exactly what God told him to do, and God watched over him. When the last animal climbed into the boat, God shut the door. Then it began to rain. It rained so much the water was over the meadows. It rained so much it covered the towns. It rained so much it even covered the mountains. But inside the boat, everyone was safe. After 40 days and after 40 nights, the rain finally stopped. But it still wasn't time to get off the boat. Water was everywhere. One day, Noah let a little dove fly out to see what was happening on the earth. It brought a green leaf back. Hooray! The plants were growing again. It was almost time to come out. At last, everyone was out of the boat, and Noah built an altar.
Thank you, God, for keeping us safe.
Then something wonderful happened. God put a beautiful rainbow in the sky and made Noah a promise.
I will never flood the whole earth like that again.
And when God makes a promise, He keeps it.
God picked Abram to be the father of a very important family. One day in the future, Jesus would be born into this family. God told Abram,
I will bless you with as many children and grandchildren as the stars, as many as the grains of sand on the beach. You will not be able to count them all. Abram, I want you to move to a new place. I will show you where to go.
So Abram started out walking. He took his wife, their nephew, and all their servants along. When Abram and his family came to the land called Canaan, God said,
This is your new home. I give it to you and to everyone who will ever be in your family.
When Abram was 99 years old, God changed his name to Abraham. His new name showed that he belonged to God. Not long after that, 3 men came by Abraham's tent, and he invited them to lunch. Abraham told his wife, Sarah,
Sarah, bake some bread. I'm going to get some meat and cook it.
When the food was ready, Abraham brought it to his visitors.
Please, friends, sit down and eat.
When one of the visitors finished eating, he asked where Abraham's wife Sarah was.
She's over in the other tent.
The visitor said,
Next year, Sarah will have a baby.
but Sarah wasn't over in the other tent. She was just outside and heard what the visitor said. She laughed out loud. She couldn't believe it. I'm too old to have a baby, she thought, and Abraham is too old to be a father. In about a year, Sarah had a baby boy, just like God had promised long ago. Abraham named the baby Isaac, which means laughter.
Everyone who hears about my miracle will be happy with me.
Sarah was so happy. She knew he was a gift from God. Abraham's son Isaac was all grown up. So Abraham told his servant,
Go back to the land I came from and find a wife for my son.
The servant loaded up camels with all kinds of wonderful presents and rode off. After he got to the land far away, he wasn't sure how to find a wife for Isaac. At a place where girls came to get water, he prayed,
Let the right girl give me water.
Before the servant had finished praying, a beautiful young woman came to get water.
Will you give me some water, please?
Yes, I'll get water for your camels, too.
It was a big job. Thirsty camels can drink a lot of water. Back and forth she went, pouring water for them all. The servant knew this woman was the one to be Isaac's wife. Her name was Rebekah. The servant took gifts to her family and asked if Rebekah could marry Isaac. Her father said she could, and Rebekah wanted to get married too. So she went home with the servant to meet Isaac. The camels swayed and bumped along the road all the way to Canaan, where Isaac lived. One evening, just before the sun went down, the camels stopped. A young man was walking in the field. He looked up and saw the camels. His bride had come. Isaac loved Rebekah. And so they were married. For many years, Isaac's wife, Rebekah, couldn't have babies. So Isaac prayed to God about the problem. God heard Isaac, and he sent 2 babies, twins. When the twins were born, one was all red and fuzzy. Isaac and Rebekah named him Esau. The other twin had smooth skin. They named him Jacob. Someday, these 2 boys would grow up to be the leaders of 2 great families. And the boys did grow up. One day, Esau came in from hunting. Jacob was cooking.
I'm hungry. Give me some of that soup.
Jacob was a sneaky guy.
Give me your rights as the firstborn son, and I will.
Okay. If I starve, my rights won't help me.
So Jacob gave Esau a big bowl of soup, and he ate it. Esau didn't even know he'd been tricked. Years later, Jacob's mother, Rebekah, helped him trick his father, Isaac, as well. And Isaac gave Jacob the blessing meant for Esau. So Isaac gave everything he had to Jacob, while foolish Esau got nothing.
Jacob had tricked his older brother Esau, who became very angry. Jacob was afraid and ran away from Esau. That night in the desert, Jacob had to sleep outside with a rock under his head for a pillow. He dreamed about a ladder to heaven, filled with angels. God spoke to Jacob in the dream and promised to bless him. Jacob continued his journey, traveling a long way. And ending up at the house of a man called Laban. There he met Laban's beautiful daughter Rachel. Jacob fell in love with her. He told Laban,
I'll stay here and work for you if you'll let me marry Rachel.
So Jacob stayed and worked 7 years for the woman he loved. After 7 years of hard work, it was finally time for Jacob's wedding. Everyone got dressed. The bride wore a heavy veil over her face. It was so heavy that Jacob couldn't see through it.
To be your bride.
I do.
And now, blessed by God, you are man and wife.
You guessed it. Laban had tricked Jacob. Rachel was not under the veil. It was her sister, Leah, instead. Jacob was mad at Laban.
What have you done?
Work some more, and I'll give you Rachel too.
Jacob married Rachel and worked 7 more years.
And now, blessed by God, you are man and wife.
At long last, Jacob decided to leave Rachel's sneaky father. He took his family and everything he had and started back home. When Jacob was almost home, a servant arrived with important news.
Your brother, Esau, is coming.
Jacob thought Esau was coming to hurt him. Jacob was afraid and prayed.
God, to save me from my brother.
That night, a man who was really God appeared. Jacob wrestled with the man.
Bless me!
So God blessed Jacob and changed his name to Israel. The next morning, Jacob saw Esau coming. Jacob bowed down in fear of his older brother. Surprise! Esau was happy to see Jacob. Esau ran to Jacob and gave him hugs and kisses.
Who are all these people?
They are my family. God has been good to me.
And so the 2 long-lost brothers became friends again. Jacob had 12 sons. He loved them all, but he loved his son Joseph best. Joseph liked to tell his brothers about his dreams. In one dream, he saw all 12 brothers had bundles of wheat. Then he said 11 bundles bowed down to his bundle. made the older brothers mad.
You're not the king over us.
When Joseph turned 17, Jacob gave him a beautiful coat with long sleeves. This also made Joseph's brothers jealous. One spring, Jacob asked Joseph to go check on his older brothers and their cattle. So off Joseph went. His brothers saw him coming.
Here comes the dreamer. Let's get rid of him.
The brothers hated Joseph, but one of them felt bad.
Let's not hurt him. Let's just throw him down this well.
He planned to rescue Joseph later. So they took off Joseph's coat and threw him in. About that time, some men on camels rode by.
Hey, let's sell him to be a slave.
So they sold their own brother. But God was watching over him. Soon, a rich man named Potiphar bought him to work in his palace.
Promises to be years of good service.
Joseph did a good job in everything Potiphar asked him to do.
Joseph, come here.
Potiphar was pleased.
How can I help you?
Joseph, I'm putting you in charge of my whole house.
Everyone had to do everything Joseph said.
Things were going great for Joseph.
Right over there.
Until one day, Potiphar's wife tried to trick him. When her tricks didn't work, she told lies about Joseph. And Potiphar believed her.
God!
Potiphar threw Joseph into jail. Poor Joseph. His brothers sold him. A lady lied about him, and he was thrown into jail. It wasn't fair. But God had a plan for Joseph.
I dreamed I saw a vine.
One day, another prisoner told Joseph about a dream he'd had. Joseph listened carefully, and God showed him what the man's dream meant.
In 3 days, you will be working for the king of Egypt, like you did before being put in prison.
Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Another prisoner dreamed he had 3 baskets of bread that he had baked for the king. In his dream, the birds kept eating up all the bread. Joseph didn't have very good news about the dream.
In 3 days, you will die.
Joseph told the truth. The man did die. One night, the king of Egypt dreamed that 7 skinny cows came from the river and ate up 7 fat cows. No one could figure out what the dream meant.
Your Highness, call for Joseph,
said the first man who had told Joseph his dream in prison. and God showed Joseph what the king's dream meant.
There will be 7 years with lots of food.
Yeah! Yeah!
Followed by 7 years with almost no food.
The king knew that Joseph was right.
Joseph had been in jail, but he was innocent. So the king of Egypt let him out. The king also put Joseph in charge of gathering enough food to feed everyone during the hungry time. The king took off his royal ring and put it on Joseph's finger. He gave Joseph fine clothes to wear and put a gold chain around his neck. The king had Joseph ride in one of the royal chariots. And everyone had to bow down to him. For the next 7 years, Joseph stored lots of food. Then a time came when no rain fell and no crops could be grown. This is called a famine. It was bad for other lands, but thanks to Joseph, the people of Egypt had food. Joseph's family back home were very hungry. His father, Jacob, told his sons,
"Go to Egypt and buy grain."
So 10 brothers packed up and went to Egypt. The youngest brother, Benjamin, stayed home. When the brothers came to the palace, Joseph knew right away who they were, but they didn't recognize their own brother, who they had sold as a slave many years ago.
You're all spies,
Joseph said to test them. They were shocked.
No, we've come to buy food.
They told Joseph all about their
We
family.
haven't come here because we're spies.
Joseph still loved his brothers, so he gave them the food. The famine was long and had spread to every country. Soon, Jacob and his 10 sons needed more food. So the sons went back to Egypt, this time bringing young Benjamin with them. Joseph told his servants to prepare a feast for the men, who he secretly knew were his own brothers. When Joseph came to the feast, all the brothers bowed down to him. Oh my! It reminded Joseph of his childhood dream about his brothers' bundles of wheat bowing down to his. And then Joseph saw Benjamin. This made him so happy he began to cry. But he didn't let anyone see his tears. Joseph gave the brothers the grain they wanted. But he also tricked them. He put his royal cup in Benjamin's sack. The rule was that whoever took something from the ruler had to be his servant forever. When the cup was discovered, Benjamin couldn't go home. The brothers begged Joseph not to keep Benjamin.
It will break our father's heart to lose 2 sons.
Hearing this almost broke Joseph's heart. He saw that his brothers had really changed. Joseph couldn't keep his secret another minute. He sent all the Egyptians out of the room. But after they left, all he could do was cry. Jacob's sons were very frightened. They didn't know why this man was crying. Finally, Joseph was able to speak.
I am your brother Joseph. You sold me to be a slave, but God sent me here to Egypt to save your lives.
His brothers didn't know what to say.
Is my father Jacob still alive? Hurry, go home and get our father and your families and bring them all here.
After they had all cried and hugged each other, the brothers did as Joseph commanded. And that's how God's people, the Israelites, came to live in Egypt.
Many years after God's people moved to Egypt, there came a new king who had never known Joseph. The Egyptians called their kings Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was mean and made the Israelites his slaves. The Egyptians were mean too. They made the Israelites work harder and harder. One day, Pharaoh had a thought.
There are too many Israelites, and they are too strong.
So he thought up an awful thing to do. He told his servants,
Every time an Israelite baby boy is born, you must throw him into the river.
That was terrible. One day, an Israelite woman had a beautiful baby boy. She decided to hide her baby. It was a good choice. After a while, the baby's mother couldn't hide him anymore. So she got a basket and fixed it so the water could not get inside. Then she put the baby into the basket and put the basket into the river. The baby's big sister, Miriam, stayed close by to see what would happen. God was watching over the baby. The Egyptian princess came to the river to take a bath and saw the basket.
Bring me that basket.
Just as her servants brought her the basket, the baby cried out.
Oh, look, it's a little Hebrew baby.
The princess decided to keep him as her son. She named him Moses. Miriam was still watching. Even though she was frightened, she stepped out of her hiding place and asked,
Would you like me to find a Hebrew nurse to take care of the baby?
Yes. Yes, please do. Thank you.
Miriam ran home and got her mother, Moses' own mother. The princess even paid her to take care of him. This is how God saved baby Moses and gave him back to his mother for a long time. When he was a little baby, Moses the Israelite was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. He grew up in the great palace of Egypt. When he was all grown up, Moses did something very bad. He killed an Egyptian man.
Hey, look!
So Moses ran away to live in the desert. He married a lady named Zipporah. One day, when Moses was out with the sheep, he saw a bush in the desert. It was on fire, but it didn't burn up. Moses went to look at this strange sight. God spoke from the fire.
Moses, don't come any closer. Take off your sandals. You are on holy ground.
Moses was scared. He covered his face.
I want you to bring my people out of Egypt. I can't do that.
But God promised to help Moses lead the people. So Moses returned to Egypt to talk to the Israelites about being free.
God is going to set all of you free from Pharaoh.
God also sent Moses' brother Aaron along to help him. The Israelites fell right down on their knees and thanked God for remembering them. Then it was time for Moses to go see Pharaoh.
Moses appeared before Pharaoh.
God says, "Let my people go."
Pharaoh was not pleased.
I do not know your God. Why should I obey him? These people have work to do. They cannot leave.
Then Pharaoh made the people work even harder. What a mean man! This made the Israelite leaders angry with Moses. They thought Moses had surely made a big mistake.
You made the king hate us!
You made the king hate us!
Go on.
Go now.
Yeah.
Get back there.
Moses prayed,
Lord, why have you brought this trouble on the people? Is this why you sent me here?
God answered,
You will see what I will do to the king.
Moses, let's go.
God sent Moses and Aaron back to Pharaoh.
Well, look who's come back.
Let God's people go. Do a miracle for me if your God is so great.
Aaron threw down his walking stick, and it became a snake.
Well, oh, I know how they do this. That's what I want to do.
Pharaoh's magicians threw down their sticks, and they became snakes too. but Aaron's snake swallowed them all. God's power was the strongest. Still, Pharaoh was so evil and his heart was so hard that he said,
"No, your people cannot leave."
When God's people left Egypt, they marched out into the desert. God did something very special to help them. He sent a tall cloud to guide them during the day. It was very dark in the desert at night, so God changed the cloud to fire. It was like a giant nightlight. Now God's people could travel, some during the day and some at night. Back in Egypt, Pharaoh had changed his mind about letting God's people leave. He sent his army after the Israelites to bring them back. Closer and closer, the army of horses and chariots came. God's people stood right by the Red Sea. There was no way across the water. Pharaoh's soldiers were behind them, and the sea was in front of them. It looked as if they were trapped. Just then, God moved the tall cloud behind his people to hide them from the enemy. The Egyptians couldn't see anything. The cloud made it dark for them, but it gave light to God's people on the other side of the cloud. Then Moses raised his hand over the sea. All night, God pushed back the sea with a strong wind, and the water split to make a dry path to the other side. The Israelites safely reached the other side, but when the Egyptian army tried to use the same path, the water came back together and covered the soldiers. And that was the end of Pharaoh's army.
God led his people out of Egypt, heading for the Promised Land. He had parted the Red Sea for them, and now they were in the desert. Soon, the people began complaining.
We should have stayed in Egypt. There we had meat and all the food we wanted, but we'll starve to death in this desert.
But God still loved his people. He made sure they had plenty of food and water. He gave them a strange white food called manna. It came from the sky and was very good for them, but still the people whined and complained. Once, God even made water come out of a rock so they would have fresh water to drink. The people were happy to have water, and they stopped whining for a little while. One day, God called Moses up to the top of a mountain to have a talk. God gave Moses many rules to help his people know how to live. God wrote the rules on stone with his finger. We call these rules the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. You must not have any other gods except me. Do not worship or serve any other gods or idols. Do not speak the name of the Lord your God thoughtlessly. Keep the Lord's day holy. Honor your father and your mother. Do not murder anyone. Be true to your husband or wife. Do not steal. Do not tell lies. Do not wish for someone else's things. Close to the end of their time in the desert, God's people camped near a walled city. The king of that city was afraid when he saw so many people camped nearby. He sent for a prophet named Balaam.
Do something to make these people go away.
So Balaam started off on his donkey to see what he could do. That made God angry because he wanted his people to be there. So God sent up an angel with a sword to stop Balaam. Balaam couldn't see the angel, but his donkey could, and stopped suddenly. So Balaam started to beat the donkey to make it go. But the donkey said,
"Why are you beating me?"
You have made me look foolish. I wish I had a sword in my hand. I would kill you right now.
But the donkey wasn't afraid.
You have ridden me for years. Have I ever done this to you before?
At this point, Balaam realized he was talking to a donkey.
No. No, you haven't.
Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes to see the angel. Balaam quickly bowed face down on the ground. The angel spoke.
God sent me to stop you from harming his people. If your donkey had not turned away, I would have killed you.
Balaam was shocked.
I have sinned against the Lord. I will not do this thing.
And that's how God used a donkey to save his people.
There was a priest named Zachariah who went to God's house one day to worship. As soon as he was inside, the angel Gabriel appeared.
Zachariah, you and your wife Elizabeth will have a son. You will name him John.
But how is it possible for Elizabeth and me to have a son? We're too old.
Zachariah, because you do not believe me, you will not be able to talk until after the baby is born.
And suddenly Zachariah could not speak. Just as the angel Gabriel had said, a baby boy was born to Zachariah and his wife Elizabeth. Their friends were very happy for them.
Name him Zachariah, after his father.
Zachariah still couldn't talk. So he wrote down, "His name is John." As soon as Zachariah wrote that, his voice returned. John became a preacher when he grew up. He lived in the desert and ate grasshoppers and honey. John told the people to change their hearts and lives and ask forgiveness for their wrongs because Jesus was coming soon. One day, when Jesus was grown up too, he came to the place where John was preaching and baptizing people. Jesus asked John to baptize him in the river.
Lord, it is you who should baptize me.
Let it be this way for now. We should do all things that are right.
So John agreed to baptize Jesus.
I baptize you in water, but you will baptize with the Holy Spirit and fire.
As Jesus came up out of the water, God's Spirit, like a dove, came down to him from heaven. God spoke and said,
"This is my Son, and I love him. I am very pleased with him."
The angel Gabriel went to see a young Israelite woman named Mary, who was engaged to marry Joseph, the carpenter.
Don't be afraid, Mary. God is pleased with you. You will have a baby and will call him Jesus. He will be the Son of God.
This was a big surprise to Mary. When Joseph heard that Mary was going to have a baby, he didn't know what to think because they weren't married yet. But God sent an angel to talk to Joseph in a dream.
This baby is from God. Name him Jesus. He will save people from their sins.
When Joseph heard God's plan, he married Mary. When everyone had to register in their hometown, Joseph took Mary to his hometown, Bethlehem. But the town was busy, and there was no place for them to sleep. Finally, Joseph found a stable, and that's where God's baby son was born. His first bed was on the hay in a manger where animals were fed. Nearby, sleepy shepherds were watching their sheep. Suddenly, an angel appeared in the sky so bright.
Don't be afraid. I have good news for you. A baby was born in Bethlehem tonight. He is your Savior. You will find him lying in a manger.
Then the sky was filled with angels singing, The shepherds hurried to find baby Jesus. They told Mary and Joseph everything the angel had said. There were also royal visitors from the far east, 3 wise men who had followed a bright star. They bowed to worship and gave expensive gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. God's Spirit led Jesus out into the desert to pray and think about what God wanted him to do next. Jesus fasted. That means he didn't eat. So he got very hungry. Soon, the devil, Satan, appeared. He knew that Jesus was tired and hungry.
Turn these rocks into bread.
Jesus knew that Satan was trying to get him to do something wrong. But Jesus had studied God's word and remembered what he had learned from the scriptures.
A person does not only live by eating bread. A person lives by doing everything the Lord says.
Satan took Jesus to Jerusalem and stood him on the very top of the temple where God's people worshiped.
If you are God's son, jump down from this high place. It is written in the scriptures that God's angels will catch you.
But that was not a smart thing for Satan to suggest, and Jesus knew it.
It is also written in the scriptures, do not test God.
That sneaky devil Satan had one more test up his sleeve. He took Jesus to a high mountaintop and showed him all the kingdoms of the world.
Bow down and give honor to me, and I will give you all these things.
But Jesus had an answer ready.
Go away from me. It is written in the scriptures, you must worship only the Lord God.
So Satan went away. Jesus loved little children, and whenever he could, he helped them. One day, an important man begged Jesus to come to his house and heal his sick son. But Jesus didn't go. Instead, he said,
Go home. Your son will live.
The man believed Jesus and went home. But before he got there, his servants met him and said,
Your son is well.
Jesus also helped a little girl. Her father's name was Jairus, and he was an important man.
My little daughter is dying. Please come and pray for her so she will get well and live.
But before Jesus could go to the little girl, she died. Still, Jesus went to see her. With the child's mother and father and 3 of his followers, Jesus went into the girl's room and took her hand in his.
Little girl, stand up.
And she did. She was well. Great crowds of people followed Jesus to see his miracles and hear him teach about God's love for them. One day, a huge crowd of 5,000 men and their families followed Jesus. It was late in the day when they reached Jesus, and the people were getting hungry. The only one with any food was a little boy with 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus blessed the food. His closest followers and helpers gave it to the people. After everyone had plenty to eat, the helpers gathered up 12 baskets of leftover food. Many people wanted to see Jesus. When Jesus saw how sick and sad they were, he wanted to help them. One day, some people brought their children to him. His helpers tried to send them away. But Jesus said,
"Let the little children come to me. Don't stop them. You must love and accept God like a little child if you want to enter heaven."
Jesus told a story about a man who had 100 sheep, but he lost one.
Now what am I going to do?
He left his 99 sheep safe at home and went looking for the one lost sheep. He searched everywhere. And when he finally found the lost sheep, he was so happy. He put the sheep on his shoulders and carried it home. Jesus told another story about a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said,
"Give me my share of the property and money."
So the father divided the property and money between his younger and older son. The younger son went to another country, far away. He had lots of fun, spending every bit of his money. After the younger son's money was gone, he got very hungry. A farmer gave him a job feeding pigs. As the son fed the pigs, he was so hungry that he ate the pig food. After a while, he realized he had been very foolish.
My father's servants have plenty of food. I'm going home. I'll tell my father that I have done wrong and ask him if I can just be a servant.
So the young son went home. He was worried that his father wouldn't want him. But his father had been looking for him every day for a long time. When he saw his son, the father ran to meet him. He hugged him, gave him new clothes, and had a party to welcome him home.
My son was lost, but now he is found.
The first Passover happened when God's people left Egypt long ago. After that, God's people celebrated the Passover every year. One year, Jesus and his closest followers traveled to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. On the way, Jesus said,
"Go into town and find a young donkey colt. Untie it and bring it to me. If anyone asks where you are taking it, say, 'The Master needs it.'"
When the men got back with the donkey colt, they spread their coats on its back, and Jesus climbed on. The donkey started to clippity-clop through the town. People came running. They threw their coats down for the donkey to walk on. They took palm branches and waved them in the air. They shouted. Some of them remembered the scriptures that said, "Your king is coming, sitting on a colt of a donkey." That night, it was time for the Passover dinner. Jesus and his closest followers gathered in a big room. Jesus stood up, took off his coat, got some water in a wash bowl, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Then he started washing his followers' feet. Jesus did this to show his friends they were to serve one another. While Jesus and his closest followers were eating the Passover dinner, Jesus took some bread and thanked God for it. He broke the bread apart and said,
"This bread is my body. Take and eat it to remember me."
Next, he took a cup and said,
"This is my blood. When you drink this, remember me."
Jesus knew this would be his last meal with his followers because he was about to be killed. He wanted his friends to always remember him. Jesus was nailed to a cross, with a crown of thorns placed on his head, and he was hung between two thieves. The skies turned black, and Jesus died. Later that night, he was buried in a tomb. It had been 3 days since Jesus died. When the women got there, they couldn't believe their eyes. The stone had been rolled away. The soldiers were so frightened they were like dead men. An angel of God was sitting on the stone.
"Don't be afraid. Jesus is alive."
The women were as happy as they could be. They ran to tell the good news. Some of Jesus' friends didn't believe what the women said. But everything the women said was true. Jesus really was alive. He had risen from death. A little later, 2 of Jesus' friends were walking along a road when Jesus joined them. At first, they didn't know who it was, but they liked talking with this man. They invited him to have dinner at their house. So Jesus came in, and while he was thanking God for the food, they realized who he was. And then Jesus disappeared. Another night, Jesus appeared in a room where many of his friends were gathered. He told them to tell their family, friends, neighbors, and strangers that he was alive.
Share everything I've taught you, first with the people in Jerusalem, then to people everywhere. But wait in Jerusalem until God sends you a special gift of power from heaven.
Jesus led his followers a little way out of town and prayed for them. While he was praying, he started to rise up into heaven. Then a cloud hid him from his followers. As everyone was standing there, staring up into heaven, 2 angels appeared beside them and said,
Jesus has been taken away from you and into heaven. One day he will come back in the clouds, just like he went away.
After Jesus went back to heaven, his friends and helpers were praying together in a big room. Suddenly, something amazing happened. At first, it sounded as if a huge wind were blowing. Next, flames of fire flickered over every person's head. Then God's Spirit came, and everyone began to speak in different languages. This was the gift from God that Jesus had promised his followers. The day that God's Spirit came to Jesus' followers, there were people from many countries in Jerusalem. These people spoke different languages. When they heard Jesus' friends praying, they went to see what the noise was all about. They found Jesus' friends telling about the great things God had done. But they were all surprised to hear it in their own language. They asked,
"What does this mean?"
After that day, when the Holy Spirit first came, Jesus' followers began to do many miracles. Telling people about God's love and how Jesus had come to save them. One afternoon, Peter and John went to the temple. A man who couldn't walk sat there begging for money. Peter looked at him and said,
"I don't have any money, but I do have something else I can give you. By the power of Jesus Christ from Nazareth, stand up and walk."
Up jumped the man. His feet and ankles were now strong. He was healed.